My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be L.M. Montgomery, Video 15, Chapter 16, the final chapter. Here is my novel, L.M. Montgomery, I Gave You Life, a novel by John Passfield. That's a photo of the historical L.M. Montgomery, the author, in 1938, or thereabouts, very close to that date. Now, in 1938, with another world war looming and her own personal problems threatening to overwhelm her, acclaimed Canadian author L.M. Montgomery begins to write what she has decided will be her final Anne novel. As she works on the new book, she recalls the days when Anne of Green Gables became a worldwide literary phenomenon and the dilemma that she faced at that time, whether to write a series of novels in which Anne would perpetually remain the child that the world had come to know and love, or to allow Anne to grow to adulthood with all the agonizing torments of the one who had given her life, L.M. Montgomery. So that's the dilemma she faces in 1938. Now, there's three novels to keep in mind. My novel, I have already held up, in which L.M. Montgomery is a character. She's a character who is writing her novel. She's writing the novel that will become Anne of Ingleside, the final novel she feels in which Anne, the character, will appear. Now, as she's working on the writing of this novel, Anne of Ingleside, it's quite natural that she thinks back to the first novel in which Anne appeared as a character, and that is Anne of Green Gables. And the question that she had at the time in her own mind, do I write a series of novels? It turned out to be 8 novels, but she didn't know the number at that time. But do I write a series of novels in which Anne remains the child that she is in Anne of Green Gables, or do I let her grow up, become an adult, and experience all of the adult joys, but also some of the adult agonies that adults suffer through? The story of my novel is the story of the writing process of the L.M. Montgomery novel, Anne of Ingleside. My novel has 16 chapters. Each chapter is a thought in the mind of the main character. The final thought in the mind of the main character draws many of the concerns of the main character to a close, though not necessarily to a conclusion. I will not read every word of the final chapter, but will read the 8 segments in which L.M. Montgomery considers her thoughts on the completion of the writing of the new novel. So let's turn to page 125 then, which is the beginning of chapter 16. So 16 chapters of thought. During all 16 chapters, her main preoccupation has been writing this novel, Anne of Ingleside. This is the chapter in which she finishes the writing process. Anne of Ingleside is complete in manuscript at last. 41 chapters of Anne and Gilbert and their brood. Nothing but Anne and her concerns for 4 whole months. Appropriate, I suppose, that I finish it in December, though of course won't be published until next spring. Okay, then we go on to the second thought about Anne of Ingleside. Yes, Anne of Ingleside is done. For that, I feel such relief. At times I would look out the window when the novel was not going well, and the word potboiler would come to mind, almost as if a Grinch had written that word in the snow. Then I would take a break for a while, rub my eyes and ask the maid for a cup of tea, perhaps do some correspondence or darn a sock. Then I'd apologize to Anne and get back to work. Every time a book of mine comes out, people read it and wonder who is who. Who's Jim Mowbray and who's Philippa Abbey? Who's the uncle who lied to the boy about his dog? Some people might think that Susan Baker is me. Why not the old aunt who does nothing but complain? How naive of people to think that fiction is real. Of course, There are different kinds of real. Not one character in the book is a person whom I know, no, nor knew when we were all young and hopeful in Cavendish. But every one of these characters, every soul in Anne of Ingleside has a presence that makes each one of them real to me. You know, there's no glamour in the writing life. It's like working in a mine or driving a truck. You plan your day, you put in your hours, and then you go home. If you're lucky, you don't bring it home. Just your job and nothing more. A means by which a person can pay the bills. Pay for the paper, pay for the ink, and what remains on the table will be yours. If there's a dime in your pocket, you've had a pretty good day. This novel took a long time to plan. Doodled away the good part of a year. I just couldn't seem to find life in Ingleside. Then the children took my fancy and things ripened up and the writing went fast. 4 months and here I am with a full first draft. Now I'll polish it as I type. It'll be done in a month or two. It'll serve to keep the wolf away from the door. Okay, then looking for the next one. Here it is. A hurried note to Violet King. I was expecting my magnum opus. Anne of Ingleside won't be that, Violet. It's just a book, that's all it is, a pleasant read. It's always hard to stir up old emotions. I'd rather write about the fresh and the new. I have a few ideas for future novels. For now, I just need to rest up a bit. Perhaps my magnum opus is around the bend. Okay. And now the 7th of 8 segments of thought about Anne of Ingleside. Why do you ask so many questions? You are as inquisitive as my character Anne. You know, Marilla wasn't too far off when she first met Anne. So many questions from such a young girl. Seemed to live with her head in the clouds. Must be nice to just follow your daydreams like a character in a book. There's a few of us have to live down here on the earth. And then the final thought. Tempted to write about Anne again? Well, perhaps I shall someday. Anne is a pretty insistent little girl. Sometimes I see Anne as the exuberant driver of the buggy and myself as a tired old sorrel mare. I can enjoy her ebullient chatter, just as Matthew used to do. But at times, I just want my barn and my bag of oats. So that's those are the sections in chapter 16 in which she thinks about the novel she's just completed. Now, I've read about half of the words in chapter 16, which is the final chapter of thought in the mind of Ellen Montgomery, the writer of the Anne books. The passage that I read concerned the completion of the writing of the novel Anne of Ingleside. Within that topic, she thinks of the length of time it's taken her to write the book. She thinks of whether the book is a potboiler or is perhaps a serious piece of literature. And she thinks about what might be the reactions of readers, whether their thoughts might be so superficial as to wonder about the origins of the characters, rather than to realize that the characters are universal representatives of the nature of all human beings. So she also thinks about why she writes, whether she's writing books as a miner, works in a mine, or as a truck driver drives a truck, simply to earn enough money to pay the bills, or whether perhaps there's a higher purpose in writing her books. She also recalls that she wondered whether she could find life in the novel, in a novel that would include her character Anne in her 40s at the time of Anne of Ingleside. But then she recalls that she found life in the children, and she was able to write the book. So she couldn't find a lot of life in her 40-year-old character Anne, but she did find life in Anne's children. She also thinks of a young writer, Violet King, who has expectations about each new Ellen Montgomery book that resemble the expectations that Ellen Montgomery had when she was Violet King's age, at about the time of the writing of Anne of Green Gables. And then she speaks as if to an interviewer, complaining that too many questions are being asked. And lastly, she considers whether she will ever write another Anne novel again. But what are the other words of chapter 16, of thought in the mind of the main character, the words that I didn't read? What else does she think of besides the writing of Anne of Ingleside? Well, the other words, the other half of the words of the final chapter of thought, in the mind of Ellen Montgomery, the writer who has just completed her novel Anne of Ingleside, are what I call deepening imagery. We think consciously, I believe, at the prose level of thought in our minds, and we also think subconsciously at the image-making level of our minds. We have the word intelligent. Let me make up another word, extelligent. How would you apply these words, supplying your own definition, number one, to the levels of thinking in the human mind, and number two, to the two levels of thinking, present moment action and deepening imagery, in the mind of Ellen Montgomery in chapter 16? If you're curious about how the character Ellen Montgomery thinks, about how all humans think at the image-making level of thought in the mind, then have a look at chapter 16. Well, here is my novel once again. It's L.M. Montgomery, I Gave You Life, a novel by John Passfield. It's found on Amazon. It's also found at rocksmillspress.com. That's my publisher's website. At my website, johnpassfield.ca, there's the planning notebook and the journal, both of which are free. You can have a look at them simply by tapping on the icon of the cover of each on my website, johnpassfield.ca. Lastly, thank you for watching this video.